Hello once again and blessings on you and your family. Hope all is blessed in everyone's lives. For those who don't remember, I'm Grandpa Elroy and I'm the official keeper of secrets and truths at the North Pole. I'm an elf. I'm also the official storyteller of the North Pole. Some people have been sending me letters and asking to know more about Helen the elf. So I asked her and Santa, and they said it was okay if I shared some of the stories of Helen's amazing life of being a saint to animals, like Vixen and Rose, but those are only a couple of the animals Helen has befriended. Today we share some more of the tales, like the little lost fox. His name was Joe. He didn't know which way to go. So many things had gone wrong. He was chased by dogs and attacked by an eagle, shot at by a human, but then huddled crying next to a tree. Helen found him a red fox. He was not much more than 6 months old. She brought him home and fed him and put him to bed. His nerves were shot after a few days of rest and good food and friendship. Joe and Helen tried to find Joe's parents, but Joe couldn't remember which way to go or how far it was, and he started to cry again. Helen picked little Joe up and started humming and rocking him in her arms. Just as little Joe started to calm down, a blue jay flew up and sat on a branch next to them. "Hello, Billy," Helen said to the blue jay. "Hello," said Billy the blue jay. "Say, is that a fox named Joe? By the way, me and some other birds are looking for a lost fox named Joe." At this, little Joe's head shot up. "My parents are looking for me," he said. Off Helen and Joe ran chasing after Billy the blue jay. About 30 minutes later, little Joe and his parents were dancing and laughing and crying, all so happy to be back together. Little Joe's parents were so grateful to Helen, and they called her a saint of animal kind. That was only one time. In fact, only one of many times she would be called a saint of animals. I do recall the very first time she was ever called a saint of animals. She was only 4 years old. Her and her father Valgar were out for Helen's first time outside of their magic-protected elf village. Valgar was pointing out different flowers. Some were helpful, others were harmful, and some were just pretty. Helen loved the pretty ones. As Valgar had moved forward talking about some of the trees, Helen had fallen behind to watch the bees dance on the pretty flowers. Just then a bear came running at Helen, growling and snarling the whole way. Valgar was just too far away to save her. Valgar looked at Helen, and she was standing there with open arms and humming loudly. Just as the bear got to her, it stopped and sat down. Then Valgar watched as Helen pulled several porcupine coils from the bear's legs. Then it appeared that Helen and the bear were talking. A few minutes later, the bear got up and left. Valgar rushed over to Helen and scooped her up in his arms. What was all that he said? Helen just giggled. Poor Koyo the bear was after some honey. When he jumped down from the tree he was climbing, he landed on the porcupine. Just then several elves from the village came over, and many had seen what happened. One of the elders said that she had only heard of 3 elves ever having been able to talk to animals. Since Helen had helped, she was known as a saint to animals. She had found her purpose. All elves have a purpose, a life goal, or better yet, a way of life personalized. That is just the way it is, but that is another story. Back to Helen's story. The second time in Helen's life she was called a saint to animals was just a few years later in the middle of the village. Helen was trying to get one of the adults to play with her, but they were all busy running around doing daily chores. So Helen just started dancing and humming to herself. And as she danced, a butterfly started to fly around, dancing around her, then 2, then 3 butterflies, then dozens. That's when the adults, who had been too busy to even talk before, all stopped and watched in wonder and amazement as hundreds of butterflies danced around the dancing Helen. Helen, who thought no one was watching, had closed her eyes while she had been dancing and humming. After a while, Helen grew a little dizzy and she stopped dancing and opened her eyes. She saw all the butterflies and everyone watching. At first she was embarrassed, but then she saw the look of joy and hope on their faces. Then Valgar walked over and picked her up. He said, "My little saint of joy and peace." This made Helen giggle. She loved to giggle. Helen was a very happy baby elf. It wasn't until 10 years later, when Helen was a toddler, that a tragedy struck. Helen's mom had been out collecting moondust when some humans who were after the unicorn she was riding attacked. Valgar and Helen were very saddened by the loss of her mother. Helen, a few days later, out for a walk in the village, was very sad and started to cry. She found a hollowed-out tree and climbed inside to cry. She lay there crying. A small bunny climbed in with her to cuddle, then a turtle. Then a few birds came to sing her a song. By the time Valgar found her, she was asleep, cuddled up with a dozen different animals. When Valgar told this to the Council of Elders, they all agreed that Helen was the saint of animals. As Helen turned from a toddler to a young child, she grew more adventurous and traveled farther and farther outside of the protected area of the village. She met and talked with many of the local animals like the rabbits and deer, and even an old vegan wolf that was always making Helen giggle. They had such amazing conversations. Helen was most proud of her friendship with a grumpy old bear. Helen called him just because if the animals would just get past his grumpy ways, they would see he's a good guy. One winter when he was hibernating, she crawled in every day for 2 weeks. She brushed and cleaned and then braided his hair. Helen hoped it would make him happy when he woke, but oh how he did get mad and yell and roll about and even tore up a couple of bushes and a tree. All as Helen watched and giggled. When Just was done, he looked at Helen and said, "Helen, saint of animals, my fur." This made Helen laugh, and when she started to laugh, so did Just. It was about a week later when Helen was on a trip with her dad, in the Northern Ocean near the ice caps of the area not too far from what would one day be the North Pole. Home of Santa and the elves, but that is another story. Today we are telling the story of Helen the Saint. Today Helen had seen a whale and was leaning on the rail of the boat, as a whale nudged the bottom of the boat. Helen fell overboard, but no one saw her fall, and by the time she was back up out the water and then caught her breath, the boat was too far away to hear her screams. The water was freezing. She used some of her elf magic to warm her body and started humming. A few seconds later she felt herself being lifted out of the water. She looked down and was amazed that a whale had come to her rescue here. She rolled over on her belly and giggled and gave Betty the whale a big hug. As Betty carried Helen, she told Helen how much she loved her humming, how it gave her such peace and joy. After about an hour they caught up to the boat as it was landing. Helen stood up on Betty and yelled to her father, Valgar, who was very relieved to see his daughter safe and sound. He was astounded to see her riding a whale, but when it came to his daughter and animals he knew anything was possible. Why, I remembered just last week when me and my granddaughter Helen— oh that's right, did I not tell you that's me, your storyteller? Grandpa Elroy is Helen's grandpa. Yes, we are best friends. Oh, do I have a ton of stories about her, but back to what happened last week. Before I forget, you got to remember Grandpa Elroy is 18,347 years old, but this story isn't about me. Just last week me and my granddaughter Helen were on a vacation in Hawaii. It was our first time there. We saw many cool things and we had a lot of fun. If you ask Helen what was her best part of the trip, she'll tell you her silly grandpa. But I tell you, it was when we were swimming and Helen started humming, and all of a sudden it was like the ocean came alive. Full of giant green sea turtles and dolphins all swimming and dancing around us. In the water it was beautiful. Something out of the dream world came true, true inner magic. Would you like to hear a little poem I wrote years ago for Helen? Helen, the saint friend to animal kind. She helps them all, even the small and the blind. With a caring hand and a tender word, one winter she watched over the eggs of an almost extinct bird. She gives her heart to them one and all, even the grumpy old bears who sleep all winter and yell at everyone in the fall. When she hums and dances in the meadow, the butterflies come to play, and at night the fireflies love to light her way. She brings peace and joy everywhere she goes. Every time I see her my face glows. She's been deep down in holes, getting dirty and grimy with the moles. She's been up ever so high, with the eagles in the sky. She loves to eat her grandpa's homemade ice cream, but she has to remember not to give it to the animals or their stomachs will scream. Every morning she loves to wake up and tell some new animal her last night's dreams. She believes in sharing them, that with help, good or bad, she can face them with a great team. She loves to go walking with the animals in the woods, and I'd be wary of any hunter wearing hoods. She'll call together a mighty team of bats and wolves and bears to make you scream, but she would rather spend her days laughing and giggling with her best friends Rose and Vixen, who are like her siblings. Together eating watermelon or by campfire eating s'mores. One thing Helen doesn't care for at all is doing her chores. But her job she really does love. It fits her perfectly like a glove. Head elf of toy design, she never fails to meet deadline. When they are done with work for the year, she takes all her workers for a double hot chocolate and a happy new year. With a hip hip hooray and a good cheer all around, they knew they were blessed with good friends around. But before the night is through, Helen is thinking of the beautiful green view. With all the bright colors that start to bloom, and all the baby animals to be born soon. With hopes she can meet and make friends with them all, last spring she counted she had 300 more by next fall. Late one night every year on a hot summer day, she throws a big party deep in the woods for all her friends to play. If you aren't invited and trying to find it, you sure get lost. For it's surrounded in a temporary mist of freezing frost. But one thing Helen wants you to know is be kind to animals and let your inner light glow. Helen the Saint is praying for you and peace and harmony and joy for you and your family too. Blessings on you. Grandpa Elroy really hopes you enjoy his rhymes, but back to the story of Helen the Saint to animal kind. Like the time Helen moved to Africa for about 8 years living deep in gorilla territory. She brokered a peace treaty between them and 3 gangs of chimpanzees that lived on the other side of the same mountain. While she was there, she loved to swing through the giant trees on the vines, and as she swung she would let out her inner animal yell. Many stories have been started because of this, but the stories are all wrong. Most tell of a wild man raised by gorillas, some say wolves and some say it was a child, but now you know the truth. It was just Helen being young, free and a little wild. It was shortly after this that she would move back home and befriend Vixen the hippo reindeer, but first she made a stop at the South Pole, where she spent a week partying with some penguins, after saving several of them from a hungry sea lion. On the last day of the party, a few seals showed up and they brought their visiting friend the snowhawk. They all had a grand time singing and dancing and eating fish stew. As you can see, Helen is truly a saint to animal kind, the whole world through to one and all. But she is so much more than a friend, a daughter and a granddaughter, who we all love and are blessed to have in our life. Well, that's all this time, but come back again, for I'm sure I have a few more stories for you that you've never heard. Until next time, Grandpa Elroy says stay blessed, and I can't wait to see you next time. What do you think my next story should be about? I wrote this book for my 3 daughters Nikki and Noy and Blefany. May all of you be forever strong and beautiful. I love all 3 of you. Working on this book has been fun. I'm hoping you are waiting for what is next.